Hello there and welcome. So today we have another topic from the lifecycle hooks, and that topic is what is the difference between NgOnChanges and NgDoCheck. Now when I was learning the lifecycle hooks, I realized that in the onchanges and in the doCheck, we usually write the same thing, that if there is something change happening, if some properties or variable is changing, then I want to detect that and then I want to process it. So that's where I'm writing that code in these two methods. And purpose wise, I see that they are doing a pretty same stuff, but then I got curious to know that if they are doing the same stuff, then what is the reason behind providing a two different methods? So that's what we are trying to understand in this video. Okay, to put a difference in very simple word, your NgOnChanges is called when a value bound to an input has changed, so you can run custom code when input has changed. On the other hand, NgDoCheck is called when the change detection runs, so you can implement your custom change detection action. Now, thing to understand here is that in NgOnChanges, if my input property, my input data has changed, then it is getting invoked. But my NgDoCheck is getting invoked when Angular has triggered the change detection. So at that time it is getting invoked. So it means that the NgDoCheck is more in the control of Angular. Whenever Angular want to start that change detection, that time the NgDoCheck will get triggered. But that is not a case in the NgOnChanges. So what I'm trying to do in this application is that I have one parent component and I have one child component. Let me show you that how it looks. So I have a parent component for which I have kept the background color as dark purple, and for the child component I have a gray color that is not visible here because I'm yet to implement that. But yeah, this is what it is going to look. So what I want to do in this application is that I will pass the data from my parent component to a child component, and in my child component I will have that two hooks, NgOnChanges and NgDoCheck, and I will try to understand that how they functions and how data is passed to them. Okay, so first thing I need to do is I need to implement one simple input in my heroes list component through which I'll be passing a simple string data to my child component. So let me do that. So I have created a input element, and in that I have put ng model. So if you don't know what is the ng model doing here, so the purpose of ng model is to have, let me correct this. So the purpose of ng model is to have two-way binding. So what I'm doing here is I'm binding the value of my input to a variable, namely child title. I'll accept that through my input tag from a parent component. I want to pass it to my child. So for that, I will add the selector of my child, which is hero here, so that my child component will get rendered just below the input. And I want to pass the data, which is child title, and the value is going to be same from the child title. And I can see that I have my input box, and as I put the initial value to it as a hero component, from here it is taking that, and that's why I can see it on the UI. Now what I want to see that if I change this input value, whether it is reflecting in my child or not. So as I can see that it, whenever I do a change into its value, it is able to change in my child component, which is in the gray here. So if I put new title, it is reflecting there. Okay. So with this, we can say that we have demonstrated that if I'm passing a string value from my parent component, it is able to change in the child component, and my child component is able to receive that properly without I have to touch any lifecycle hook there. Now we'll try to do another thing again. This time I pass the string value just from here. Now what I want to do is, instead of this title, I want to pass an object. I will create one object in which I'll specify two properties, object of heroes where I will pass name and the superpower, and that I want to render in my child component. So let's implement code for that. So I have first thing I will do is I will create the input similar like the above one. Let me just copy this. I will create the ng model first for the name, second for the superpower, enter name, enter superpower for placeholder, and it will point to the name and the superpower variable that I already created, and as you can see I have put the type of them as a string here. Now I also want to create one button, and I want to give an class to it as a success. So I added a button here, and on that button click I am calling add new hero, and in that add new hero I'm assigning a value of name and superpower to my new hero object, and later on I want to pass this new hero object to my child component. So for that I need to have the same property binding for the new hero, and this time I will write new hero equals to new hero. So I can see there is an error that says that type event is not assignable to a type string ng model, and before that it says it can't bind to a ng model since it isn't a known property of input. So this is the error that we get, and the reason is that this ng model belongs to a forms module, and if I have not imported the forms module in my project in my module, then it will show this error. So let me go to the app module and will import the forms module. Yeah, I have to import the forms module from the forms module Angular forms, and now I can see that error must have gone. So I don't have that error now. So let me go to the browser and see what changes are there. So yeah, I can see that I have the string that was already there, and I have two new inputs, name and superpower. Let me format this little bit. There we go. I have them in a individual line now. So I have enter name, enter superpower, and I want to now pass the new hero object that I created from my parent to a child. So let me try this. I'm putting a value windstorm, and to superpower I can fly. And now let me click on add new hero, and it is doing nothing. So it is interesting to know why this is happening. If I'm just simply passing the string data, I'm able to see that immediately in my child component. It is reflecting there, but if I'm passing an object from my parent to child, it is not reflecting. So the reason is, and it is very interesting, that whenever Angular check for the changes, it do and dirty checking. So dirty checking is a concept of JavaScript where it does a strict type of checking using the triple equals to operator. And here when it tries to do that checking, it sees that it is comparing the object which is of hero type here, and it is comparing them by the reference, not by the actual value. So if when it compares that with the reference, it finds that the reference is always same. And as you can see in my heroes list component, in my parent component, there I put a new hero which I'm creating a only new object of for which I'm creating a new object of hero, and that is just only once. And that's why whenever Angular tries to check that if my heroes from the child is changed to a parent, it says that is always same because it is checking by the reference and it's not checking the value. So instead of doing in this way, if I put a different code like this, if I will have this dot new hero equals to new hero, and I will simply initialize its name and superpower to empty and will remove this line. So when I do this, I get a warning from TypeScript. It says that has no initializer and it is not definitely assigned. So to avoid this, I can put this non-null assertion operator, which is exclamation mark here. So basically it says that we are sure that this new hero, this variable, not going to have undefined or the null value. So okay, in the add new hero, I have new hero which I created and then I assign it to. And now let me go to the browser and see if I'm able to see the data now. So I'll put data again, click on add new hero, and this time I can see that I'm able to get that data in my child component. Now let's come to the NgOnChanges and see what are things are available in the NgOnChanges. So in the NgOnChanges we have access to one object which is of type simple changes. So if I type simple changes, you can see that I can put that, and that is part of my Angular core, so I need to import it. And if I put the console log here of the changes and go to the browser, let's see what I get there. So in the browser I can see, if I do a refresh in the browser, I can see that I have a title and the new hero. That are the two properties that I'm passing from my parent component, which contains the previous value and the current value. So this is the additional thing that we have in NgOnChanges. If we have access to a simple change object, and there we can compare the current value and the previous value, and that we don't have available in NgDoCheck. So I will put a log here also. And now if I'm doing anything, I can see that for any change I'm doing, I see that the control is going to a NgDoCheck. So this is the interesting thing to know here, that NgOnChanges have access to a simple changes object where we can do a current and the previous value comparison if we want that if we want that logic in our code. But in the NgDoCheck, we don't have access to that. We have access to all the components variables, so through that way we can still access it, but it don't have a simple changes where we can do a comparison of the previous and the current one. Now, a thing here is that as I was showing that NgDoCheck, it runs when Angular runs the change detection action. So I want to show this to you. DoCheck is called by the Angular change detection mechanism. I have put this line here, that change detection I have put change detection strategy I have put as a on push. So I recommend you to refer this document, where in the Angular documentation they have explained about the Angular change detection and how we can play around with it. So basically there are two strategies on push and the default. You will learn more about them. So what I'm going to do now is I want to override the existing behavior of the change detection, and for that I will write some code here. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I have detached the default change detection strategy, whatever I have, through the change detector ref instance, and I have put the set interval of 5 seconds where I want after 5 seconds that chain detection to be again triggered. I see that it is in the inside do check, and after 5 seconds again it has gone there. So and this keeps on increasing. So this is the one way that we can override the existing chain detection, and this proves that whenever I do any modification to my chain detection mechanism, my do check is getting called there. So one more thing I want to show, that if I put any value here now in the string, I can see that it is still being it is being received by my NgOnChanges, but whenever I like do a changes, it is not instantly reflected here. There is some delay I can see whenever I'm doing a changes, and that delay is because of the custom do check I put, the strategy that I put where I have put the delay of 5 seconds. So that's why I can see that it's not immediately reflecting. So this means that whenever Angular does a change detection, it checks for what is the strategy of it, and in the change detection, it assigns the value that has received it from the external components. Then it binds that to its view. So that's why we have this delay over here. Okay, so coming to the conclusion, what we learned in this video. So ngDoCheck is a function that is get called every single time an event has fired in the app that may cause a change. So it is completely depends on how Angular change detection has been implemented, what is the strategy for the change detection, and whenever the change detection has ran, that it will hand over the control to the ngDoCheck. Where the NgOnChanges, this is more of the input properties. If we have the input bindings done, and if that input properties are changing by external component, that time NgOnChanges will get called. And we also saw that if you are having an variable which is of type array or object, basically if it is a reference type, then NgOnChanges fails to check its value because it does an dirty checking where it checks for the only the reference and it doesn't check for the actual value. So to get rid of that issue, we need to create a new reference of the object or the array type, so that Angular will get to know that the value has changed or not. So that's all for this video, and I hope you may find this helpful. Thank you.